Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're just going to give another minute for folks to come in, and then we'll get started. So thank you so much. All right, so hello again. Thank you again for taking the time to join this session. We're very happy to be here today. My name is Teresa Anderson. I'm a senior researcher at the Urban Institute, which is a nonprofit social policy research organization based in Washington, D.C. And I have been doing work on student parents for a few years now. In fact, my doctoral dissertation was on women who go back to school after having children, and I've been very fortunate with that work to be looped into this amazing community and to continue to build on that work at the Urban Institute. And a lot of my background is in helping ensure opportunities for education and success for folks who have been traditionally underserved by our education system, including adult learners, opportunity youth, students who have otherwise not been well served in traditional education pathways. So I am co-presenting this with Autumn Green, who will give her an introduction and a little bit of background about her. So thank you.
Sorry. Hi, I'm Autumn Green. I am the director of the Higher Education Access for Student Parents Research Initiative at Wellesley Centers for Women, which is a globally focused research and action institute based at Wellesley College. I have been studying student parents probably for 2 decades and started as a student parent. So that's really driven my work in this field. And Teresa and I have been working together for the last few years, working on different policy issues pertaining to student parents. And we're really excited to be able to have a more conversational webinar, if that's possible today. So we're hoping to invite participation from the audience.
Great. Sorry, my slide just skipped itself. So I'm also going to note that we appreciate Julia here will be helping support the session and help managing the discussion. And to give a little bit of background, so this work that we'll be talking about is early preparation for a project supported by Imaginable Futures. That project is just getting going, so we're really hoping to leverage the expertise and insights from the participants in this session to help inform the early stages of this work. As Autumn said, this will be an interactive session. So because we don't have too many people, we are going to actually make all of you co-presenters, which allows you to go off mute and participate in the discussion more like a typical Zoom meeting than a webinar. But of course, you don't have to speak up verbally. You're welcome to also use the chat and the Q&A function if you'd like to participate that way. But just note that you'll be at some point shortly upgraded to a panelist so that you can choose to go off mute. And if you wanted to turn on your camera, you're welcome to participate in the discussion. So and with that, we will get into the little bit of background about what we're doing. Great. So student parents live in families, and families, especially families with low economic resources who are pursuing education, interact with a lot of systems, supports, and policies. So what we're trying to do is think about families holistically and the ways that student parents and their families, what the various systems, supports, and policies are that student parents interact with, and how they overlap as we're talking about student parent families. Sorry, my mouse has a little bit of an issue. So we want your help with that. And just to give a little bit more context when we're talking about these kind of different areas that student parent families interact with. So there's the notion of a traditional student, which is the one that the system was designed for, our higher education system. And that stereotypical traditional student is a male in early adulthood whose family supports the cost of attendance and whose primary responsibility is his education. And the truth is that traditional college students are a diminishing portion of the real college student population. I think that's not a surprise to anybody here. But when we think about that traditional college student, he largely interacts with just one system, which we can call this the college access and success policies. And these are a lot of the things that higher educational institutions have been trying to design for that traditional student for over a century. And maybe he also has a job. Let's make that small and on the side. Kind of, he might have a little bit of interaction with employment and the labor market. But generally, it's really the college realm that he's in, and the colleges are largely, have been traditionally largely focused on his access and success. Of course, we're changing the script on that because when we think about a student parent who is most likely to be single female and also more likely to be a student of color, college access and support is not the only set of system supports and policies that affect her. In fact, there are many systems, supports, and policies that affect her and her child. So we can start with college access and success policies. We can also talk about tuition assistance and financial aid. Employment and the labor market, often while she's in school, she's also working. Childcare availability, affordability, and quality. Social safety net programs, tax benefits, non-safety net supports, social services programs, K-12 education for her child, so we are talking about her entire family, workforce and training systems, and finally infrastructure. And so we're going to dive into each of these in a little more detail, and actually a lot of the session is going to be about digging into a subset of these one by one and talking about how they play out for student parent families. But first, our first question for the group is, does this kind of generally look complete? Are there other system supports or policies? Again, we're talking about structural things that are missing here that we might want to have in this picture. I'm just going to open that up, and if folks want to go off mute or put a note into the chat, we'd really welcome that. All right, and we'll say this is good, but we're going to get in a little bit more. And if folks want to actually, since we have the chat going, if you want to put a little, since we don't have so many folks, if you want to put your name and your affiliation in there just as a sort of, hi, how are you? That would be a nice way to get things started. Someone suggested preschool. So I think that's a really good point. So we have K-12 education and we have childcare, but preschool, like an academic preschool structure, is something that we should probably call out explicitly. So that's a really good point. And we'll figure out where that fits. Maybe it goes into pre-K through 12 education. And healthcare and mental health care. That's a really good point too. And we kind of were trying to figure out health insurance might fall within either college access and success or social safety net, but thinking about generally the ways that healthcare, mental health care fit in, that's a really good one that we should definitely make sure that it's really clear what that is. And then military benefits, that is interesting. And that's something that we're trying to figure out in this project. You can tell that we're in earlier stages because we're talking about we can then get into student parent families who have different characteristics. So you could also talk about the immigration system. You could also talk about military. You could talk about other things that affect certain subsets of student parent families. And that I think will be added dimensionality to this. That'll be really useful as we transportation, that's one we did think about within infrastructure, but I think it's important to be really explicit about where that fits. Unemployment benefits kind of fits within social safety net programs, I think. And actually, we're going to talk about that. So let's get into that one a little bit more, because that's a great point. So I also want to note that one thing we're going to do is identify how common it is for student parents to interact with each of these programs and issues that we identify as best as we can from existing data. So that we'll know which are the most relevant and important as we're thinking about how to create cohesive policy systems that help student parents complete college degrees or other education goals, which is really why we're trying to develop this framework. Legal assistance and access, that's a great one. And that might be kind of a non-safety net support, but I think that there's probably a space for that we need to really carve out well. So thank you.
I think that's important too with all of
due to data limitations. There is currently no data on the share of student parents in each state. However, it's exciting to note that Oregon.
Oh.
Jillian, we lost you.
Jillian?
You're okay. I'm just watching.
Oh, well, I thought you were talking. I'm sorry. So I was just going to add that there's in all of these kinds of systems, for example, the mental health counseling kind of access and the legal access, that there are both community strategies and on-campus strategies, and that student parents are turning to both community-based providers and campus-based providers for those services, and thinking about, so that's another way that some of these things fall into more than one bucket and aren't, these categories aren't necessarily, clean or mutually exclusive.
Yeah. But I do appreciate the ones that you all want to highlight and elevate, because we really want to make sure that we know which categories they go in, and it may be multiple, but because they're different ways of structuring it. So this is really useful. So we want to actually do a lot of this session is going to be digging into some of these. And we're going to start here with the social safety net. And for each system, support or policy, which we call a realm as shorthand, we don't have a better word yet. If you want to suggest one, we're welcome. We welcome it. We'll list some specific programs and issues, and then try to annotate how student parents show up in policy or practice for each. And we want your help with this. And the reason we want to do this is because we suspect/know that a lot of systems are set up for parents or workers or students or people who are low income, or people, and not for that intersection of of parenting students. So talking about social safety net programs. So we've identified these specific programs within here. And actually, this is where unemployment insurance should be, and it's not. So that's a good one that we should add. So right now we have TANF, SNAP, TANF, which is cash assistance, SNAP, which is food assistance, women, infants, and children, which is food and supplies for pregnant women and infants, public and subsidized housing, Medicaid or public health insurance, and then kind of other assistance like heating and energy and other things. But we should add unemployment insurance, seems like an important one there. And so then we want to annotate how student parents, and especially student parents who are pursuing college degrees, show up in each. And really it's a brainstorming exercise, and questions and personal experiences are very much welcome. And I see this note about CCDF. We have childcare in its own, because it's such an important one, we have it in its own bucket. But what we're going to do is actually switch to this cool Jamboard where we can start annotating. You'll see that we have, we don't have them all filled in yet. We just started this project like a week ago, and so we're really excited about these ideas and having the brain trust give you input. So see if this works. So Julia's going to put in the chat some prompting questions, and what we'd really like is for you all to share either questions or ideas or even your own experiences with these programs and how they do or do not work well for student parents when trying to leverage those supports, as well as others that we've missed here, which, unemployment insurance being one. Oh yeah, there it is right there. We added it now. Thanks. See, this is real time. And we'll put it in. So what is people's understanding and experience with TANF or SNAP or WIC or housing or public health insurance or UI? And I think you are able to go off mute if you'd like. And there are a few more attendees that if we can get those promoted up to panelists, that would be great.
So just as to open it up as an example, talking about, how do student parents show up? How are they considered and how are they counted? I just wanted to give an example to kind of open it up. But I live in Portland, Oregon, and in Portland, the Housing Authority does not actually allow student parents to live in affordable housing complexes without also working. And so student parents show up as workers and residents in that context. And really their status as students is minimized and even discouraged. So that's, one example of how the housing realm is responding and how student parents are showing up. But we invite any kind of examples of any of these areas or other areas as well.
And we also know, so we have here noted already, allowable activity restrictions for degree track education within TANF. So TANF sometimes allows resources to support training, but generally that training is either high school completion or very short-term credentials like a CNA, but not a degree track education. So Heather shared about how she needed to get a SIP to continue on TANF at a four-year university. So that was a improvement plan. Sorry, what is the So unemployment only keeps weekly payments going for additional 26 weeks. It does not pay for tuition and fees. All students qualify for financial aid due to previous income. Processes are often fraught with red tape. We find the programs are not always seamlessly connected to each other, making it all more difficult or even impossible for students to access all the programs at once. That is exactly why one reason we were trying to do this project is to say, where do student parents show up and how can we align systems better, or where can we change policies to make this a much smoother process and a more supportive process so that it's actually helping people complete their degrees. Some states have workforce training programs for each 3 occupations, high demand, high skill, high wage. Yeah, but some of those don't support degree track education. So sometimes they'll support a certain amount, but not always a associate's or a bachelor's track, or the completion of an associate's or bachelor's degree. Sometimes it depends on the field. So that's an interesting point. That's really important.
I had a student parent I was working with in Seattle who was on the BFED program, which is the SNAP education and training program. And she actually she had met all of her nursing prerequisites before she was allowed to take the GED, because suddenly if she took the GED, she was kicked out of her program and didn't have childcare anymore. So these are the kinds of, I think, policy quirks and problems that we're looking to identify in these programs and start to really address to make this easier for families to navigate. And I know Casey had said something about, all of these programs are really difficult to just, it's time consuming, it's tedious, there's a lot of paperwork. And, I have to say, having lived through this system and been the person in charge of managing and engaging with these systems for my family, I know that firsthand, and I've actually written about it, talking about the unspoken shift, which is really, the work that low-income women do to hold together their family safety net programs and requirements, and that it is, all of these programs are, I think, right now difficult to navigate, and so that's part of, figuring out why are they difficult to navigate and how can we make it easier for families.
Yeah, I really like this point that Diane made also. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Autumn.
Go ahead. I just was looking at chat comments, so I am trying to highlight a few, but go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, I really appreciate this point that Diane made about kind of gaining in one area and falling off the cliff in another area. And we're actually seeing this at Urban across a lot of our work, where especially with the kind of boost in unemployment insurance benefits, which seems like it should be a good thing. It's making people ineligible for other things that are really critical. And just the ways that the programs interact with each other and the ways that they count each other as income ends up not allowing folks to actually move ahead, because as soon as you make another dollar, you lose 80 cents. And so, and especially if that 80 cents is for something like healthcare or something like childcare, that really is like a needed service that's like goes beyond its cash value. That's a real problem for folks.
I wanted to ask, you said that your low-income housing only allows one household member to be enrolled in school full-time. Does that include minors?
I'm pretty sure it does. I'll double check with and get back to you. But,
I'm just thinking, like, what if you have multiple kids, or
yeah,
like,
or a roommate that's going to school, kind of thing, or yeah.
Or you and your partner are doing it together. And...
Oh yeah, no, that's not possible, for sure.
And also, like, what counts as school? If you do a short-term training program and the other person's in a degree program, is that also, I mean, is that considered two people going to school, and that's not okay? Anyway.
I also, Heather had said that Medi-Cal doesn't cover dental, or that the dental coverage is really bad. I know Oregon Health Plan doesn't cover glasses or vision for adults who are over the age of 21 and not pregnant. And so, you know, there are just all kinds of things, even if you have Medicaid, or you have, you know, a child care voucher, the process of actually finding cover, you know, navigating that coverage, understanding what's covered, what's not, and then finding providers who are willing to take that coverage is, you know, we're also thinking about how that works in terms of policy.
This is great. Are there other insights or experiences that folks want to share? And if not, we'll go to the next one, and we can always loop back if there's things that we forgot about. Oh yeah, the long wait list for family housing. That's kind of a campus housing issue, I think, from what I'm gathering from the comment, but that's a big issue. You know.
Well, I work with family housing programs, and we actually have a database of every college and university in the country with family housing. And only 6% of colleges have family housing at all. I actually have an article coming out about the University of Oregon, which has 435 units of family housing. And the waiting list is more than a year. And so part of it, I think, there was a comment that I heard earlier about how we don't have student parent data. And so if we don't have student parent data, then we don't know that 435 units of family housing is less than a third of what's needed at the university, because it seems to the university, hey, we have one of the biggest family housing programs in the country. Most colleges don't have it at all. And there's only, you know, or only have a unit or two, and we have 435 units. But Francis Pastorell, who is the director of U of O's family housing, told me that, you know, he's constantly dealing with wait lists and, you know, trying to get families in crisis into housing, and that having more data would help to really make the case that they need more family housing units.
Yeah. And of course, then there's the chicken and egg issue of who collects the data so that you can actually make that case. And if you don't have the case, then anyway, this is what Oregon's dealing with now with having the new legislation around collecting data on student parenting, on parenting status among students. In Illinois as well.
Before we move on from safety net programs, are there any safety net programs that people think are doing a really good job for student parents?
Mm-hmm. Crickets.
My name is Diane. I put a couple things in the chat and I was going to put this up in the messages, but I thought it would take too long while you were waiting to hear. One thing that we have seen begin to change, I'm at Lakeland Community College in the Women's Center on the east side of Cleveland. And we really struggle with housing because we don't have any campus housing, and a lot of the community programs really only help students on a sliding scale, or they'll help them for say 6 months. And you're like, well, student parents are taking 3 to 5 years to complete an associate's degree. 6 months is not really what they need for housing assistance. But one thing we have seen the county making an effort to do, and they're going to be on campus starting next year, having SNAP available automatically based on the FAFSA that you present to the college, and they will connect you and get that set up almost automatically. It hasn't happened yet, but that's the promise. So that is promising if indeed it does come through.
That's a great point. These kinds of pass-through eligibility policies, like how the school lunch programs often automatically designate eligibility for families that receive SNAP. If there's ways to use FAFSA information to make to allow people to kind of directly qualify for other types of assistance, that just seems like a great way to streamline many of these processes. And in fact, may also cut down recertification needs if folks can keep the information updated with the school can manage the process of recertifying too. Barbara, which holdovers from AFDC rules?
Some of the things like only one person in school and all these very restrictive rules sounded a lot like the AFDC limitations. And I was wondering whether those are, how many of these are direct holdovers, and if anything could be done to attack them from that point of view.
I think a lot of it relates actually to welfare reform and the transition from AFDC to TANF. And so, you know, with TANF, the idea of TANF, you know, aid to families with dependent children, the idea was people were on it forever. And, you know, TANF was a response to all of the welfare stereotypes that we know were never true. But one of the things, and Teresa and I have talked about this a lot in TANF, is a workforce first orientation. And work first, basically the philosophy is that when you're poor, any job is better than no job. And that somehow you're going to work your way up from your fry cook job to, you know, something that actually is going to be able to support your family. Maybe you can become the manager of you know, or the idea is that there are career ladders once you get into a job. But what we've learned is that low wage jobs are dead end jobs. And so they're not actually there's no ladders without education. And so what a shift that we've seen is the idea, we've called it the shift from work first to work second. So we understand that in the 21st century, maybe just getting a job right away is not the best idea. Maybe you do need some education and training in order to prepare yourself for the workforce, but we still want you to get a job as fast as possible, because we're still working from that orientation that the best thing that you can possibly do is get a job as fast as possible. And so this idea that, I mean, one, there's this idea that school is not work. There's this idea that students who are both working and in school, that the fact that they're in school somehow negates the fact that they're working. But that, and also that you should get done with this as quickly as possible. So we'll fund your 1-year certificate or training program, but we will not fund your associate's or bachelor's degree program. And we're seeing that a lot. And it's
often it's not even a year that they'll fund. I mean, in Kansas, they would only go up to 5 credits. 5 credit program. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I was just playing on that. Go ahead, Anna. I'm going to finish here.
Oh no, I was just saying that I think I finished my thought, but you know, this idea that we need to get people through whatever training they're doing. I mean, I've seen programs that are as short as, you know, 3 to 6 weeks, and the idea that, you know, that someone is going to have, you know, a meaningful education and training experience in 3 to 6 weeks that's going to prepare them, you know, for a living wage career, you know, to those of us who work in higher education, is ludicrous. But that's really, you know, that's the work second kind of approach is, you know, so with, I mean, the housing policies, with the TANF policies, with SNAP E&T policies, I really see it being driven from that ideology, if not, you know, actually codified in the policies of these different programs.
That's great. Thank you. And sorry, I sent a note to everyone. So that's okay. I forgot that everyone's a panelist, but that's okay. I do want to keep moving because I think this is really valuable and I want to continue to get insight from the group here. So I want to go to this next realm, which is tax benefits. Tax benefits in the US, as we all know, is a major source of financial support for low-income workers. And we've identified the following tax credits and benefits as potentially relevant to student parent families. We have the child tax credit, the additional child tax credit, the earned income tax credit, the American Opportunity Tax Credit, and the lifetime learning credit, as well as tuition tax deductions, child care tax credit, and 529 plans. And we note that not all these are credits, which is why we call it tax benefits. You know, 529 is a tax beneficial way of saving for higher education. And we're thinking about, again, how parents show up in each of these in terms of policy or practice. So I'm going to go to another sheet of this, and we're going to continue to brainstorm and talk about tax benefits. And we have noted already about how the child tax credit, many things just aren't adjusted for parents who are students. You know, earned income tax credit only considers earned income, so that's only useful if you're also in school well, or also working well in school. American Opportunity and the Lifetime Learning Credit are not adjusted for dependents and often are not fully refundable. In fact, I think the Lifetime Learning Credit is not refundable at all. And American Opportunity Tax Credit is only the first $1,000 is refundable, and then $1,500 is not refundable. So there's a lot of ways that they like get a little bit along the path, but then don't fully get there. And I'm curious what other folks have had in your experience with tax benefits or interacting with trying to support student parents through the tax system, or support yourself as a student parent through the tax system. One other comment that was interesting, I didn't put it on here because it's kind of a next step thing, but apparently the student loan interest deduction requires an extra form that is not part of the basic package for TurboTax or H&R Block. It's part of the like premium version. So even though you can get that form for free from the IRS website, a lot of people don't file it because it's not like built into the packages that most people get low cost. And it's just like a really weird, silly way that people are kind of not claiming what's available to them for their student loan interest.
Well, and I think that I was just looking at the Jamboard and wondering too about VITA tax clinics and how are families accessing and filing their taxes. I've gotten into it with my students about not using H&R Block because they take so much of their money. And really, in my experience, don't do a very good job. Whenever I have asked student parents in my research about their different tax credits, a lot of times it feels like they don't actually know which tax credits they get. And, you know, so I'm wondering about, you know, what do people really understand about tax credits? And, you know, are these things that are coming primarily when you're a student or after you graduate, like the student loan interest deduction, for example?
Yeah, and then folks might not even file. If you're on TANF and going to school, if you don't have any earned income and you're only a student, you're receiving TANF. I mean, I think nowadays, especially, you still should get a child tax credit. And in fact, the new reforms to child tax credit are going to be somewhat automatic. But you almost always are going to get some benefit out of having filed if you have dependent children. So that's bad advice. And then free tax filing from the college and having a student emergency fund. I think that's really important. Do people take advantage of that, Janet? Do you find that a lot of folks are coming through? Many applications each year. I mean, this is what's interesting too with the tax credits. We're doing another project at Urban about benefit cliffs and how benefits interact for TANF families. And whenever we ask about tax credits, it's like everyone's just like silent. Like, yeah, I get a refund, but I don't really know how it works, or like how it's kind of like magic. You give people the numbers and then they tell you a number and you just hope that's the right one. And knowing what's available and what it means and how to maximize it, especially things like the earned income tax credit, where you could theoretically do some strategizing about how you manage your work in the year. It's just interesting how it's such a huge area that's like the most opaque. It's an area of support that people just don't understand well. And are you all familiar with the new child tax credit that's coming through? They're gonna, I think in July, start just like depositing money in people's accounts monthly. So that, if you don't know about that, it's
Do you know what the age limits for that are? Because I know when my kid turned 17 that they decided that I didn't need child tax credits anymore, even though she was still in high school and still living at home, because logically 17-year-olds don't need support. But I'm just wondering if there's any, I just saw it pop up in the Jamboard, so.
Yeah, so I do think that your child would be a dependent until the year they turn 18, but I'm not a tax expert. And then this is also, you get per child, $300 under 6, $250 over 6, and so it can add up. And I'm not sure what the limit is on the number of kids you can have, but it's kind of, they call it an advance on your taxes. So it also means you wouldn't get as big of a refund next year, but you'd be getting the resources kind of spaced out going up to the tax season. And Heather, yeah, happy to talk more about the cliff and share that we're doing a project in Colorado, Minnesota, and New York, looking at the ways that benefits interact for TANF families and how people think about that. And so we're still working on it, but feel free to get, I'll have my email at the end, feel free to get in touch. I'm happy to share some of the insights from that as it comes together. Yeah, the point about international students and immigration and visa systems, I think that's something we need to add to our framework. It just applies to so many folks. And so I appreciate you raising that point, Janet, and also just the cost of all of that. So maybe with this, we can go to, unless Autumn, do you have another question about tax credits, or should we go to the next one? I think we'll have more. Great. So this is what we're calling non-safety net supports. And this is broad. There might be other things that need to fit in here. So just a note that we're separating tuition assistance and financial aid into a separate realm here. So that's not reflected here. So right now it's just these two, but there's probably things we're missing. And you know, like the child tax credit, well, child tax credit is even more targeted, but the stimulus payments, there was no real targeting except very broadly by income. Many student parents receive checks from that. And then of course there's supports from nonprofit organizations, which we know is huge. But there may also be complexities about how nonprofits support student parents and also what the incentives are about which student parents to help. And I talked to some folks when I was doing my dissertation work, especially people who are in graduate school who kind of fell into the middle, like people who are in master's programs who just like a lot of the targeted support was for folks who were undergrad or folks who were younger or people who had, you know, children under a certain age and just kind of always kind of fell right outside the eligibility for a lot of the supports that might be available. Interesting. So are there other non-safety net supports we should be highlighting? And also, what has been your experience with stimulus payments as well as the nonprofit organizations, which we know is just can be huge? And you can tell that if we were in person in a room, we would have sticky notes and you'd be writing things and we'd be really engaged and it would be super fun. So we're hoping as much as we can to emulate that here, but I know it's harder in this format. Oh yeah, sliding scale health clinics. Those are really important, thinking about the nonprofit sector as a major source of health support in healthcare, and especially reproductive health care. And the tax credit point, that's a good one, about why do they cut off at 18 when they're still dependent up to age 24 in other systems and how that's misaligned is a really good point, and that's something to be thinking about in terms of policy. I'm not including the support from the college or university because we have the college access and success policies, which are really ones like provided by the college as their own system. But I think if you want to comment on that, we're happy to kind of incorporate it into that piece. We don't have to be totally segmented. And people are welcome to take themselves off mute and talk if it's easier than typing into the chat.
I think it's worth to think about college and university supports to separate out things from the college which are available to all qualified students without regard to how many people apply, and supports from things such as a women's center or such that raise money and have a certain maximum number of grants they can give and aren't the kind of entitlement thing that's from the university as a whole.
Yeah, that's really important. The kind of targeted supports and targeted grants. And there's a lot of trade-offs about how colleges want to direct those. Unfortunately, the resources tend to be, it feels like a scarcity situation, but I think that's really important in thinking about how they're structured so that student parents can benefit. It's really valuable. Yeah, Heather, thank you for sharing that comment, that kind of nonprofit support wasn't something that was important in your undergraduate experience.
I think it can also be tricky because there's nonprofit organizations that are providing what I would consider safety net supports, food boxes, emergency fuel assistance. The LIHEAP program, for example, is contracted down to usually through nonprofit organizations. So I just wanted to point that out because I imagine somebody else might be thinking the same thing, is that, like, okay, well, is this a safety net support or a non-safety net support? You know, that in terms of what the nonprofit is actually providing. And you know, obviously welcome any ideas about nonprofit services. When I worked at Endicott College, we partnered with a lot of nonprofits who just gave free resources, toys, clothes. So the students didn't necessarily engage with those nonprofits directly, but we were serving as a liaison who was picking up things and kind of handling that process so that they didn't have to.
Mm-hmm. And I think it sounds sometimes, you know, this conversation itself is kind of raising this, I think, awareness about, it's sometimes even hard to distinguish, like what's coming from the college, what's coming from government, what's coming from other organizations, like where are things coming from, and how do you kind of think about them in your kind of daily experience? And you know, people aren't always thinking about, oh, where is this, who's supporting this food box, or who's supporting this support, but as we're thinking about systems and structures and the ways that financing works and the ways that incentives work, I think it's useful for us to be at least trying to tease out the different threads of where services exist and who's supporting them.
Well, and I think that there's a lot of policy threads. So the CARES Act, for example. So my roommate has a SafeLink wireless phone, which is part of the low-income telephone access program. And so recently, you know, he gets a text message from SafeLink Wireless that says, oh, you're going to have these expanded benefits, and you're going to have a hotspot and unlimited data and all these things that, you know, weren't really part of his phone plan before. But so from the participant's perspective, it feels like SafeLink Wireless is doing all of these things, and aren't they great? But when I'm looking at it, it's like, oh, this was funded by the CARES Act. And so the CARES Act has distributed this fund to SafeLink Wireless to expand benefits. And the policy that made this happen is not, you know, internal to you know, the phone service provider. It comes from the CARES Act. But the experience that of, you know, the client feels like it came directly from the service provider. And I think that's something that can often be confusing when you're trying to trace back these threads of different policies to figure out, okay, well, we're seeing this, you know, the clients or the student parents are seeing this presented to them in this way, but what's actually going on behind each of these things? So when I bring free clothes and Halloween costumes to the students and drop them off, it feels like I'm just a really nice person who, you know, got all these free clothes and Halloween costumes for the families. But there's actually, you know, a backstory that has to do with policy. And I think that's part of what we're trying to trace, is, you know, figure out.
I think that's a good point too that Barbara raised around, you know, how time restrictive are these? And I mean, this is something that I think has been an ongoing conversation, even with, for example, the child tax credit expansion. The Biden administration wants it to be permanent. Congress is only willing to make it temporary right now. I think it's going to be true for a lot of these CARES Act supports, as well as the various flexibilities that have been allowed in programs around how people recertify, how people qualify. And I don't think that it's known yet what's going to persist and what's going to change, but I think there's an opportunity to make the case for what a big difference these types of supports make, and then what kind of benefits they have for folks that are actually like desirable in society. We want folks to be able to complete their college degrees. We want folks to be able to have healthy families. And so it's a good question. I see more comments coming in about nonprofit partnerships, which is great. And I think there was a session yesterday, I went to the other one, but about that the role of nonprofits in partnering with colleges in student parent supports. And one thing that's hard with nonprofits is a lot of it is not structural. It's, you know, 1,000 flowers blooming. Funders often are the most, that kind of set the agenda to some degree, but there's still just not like a coherent strategy that is kind of how nonprofits provide their supports. And so it's harder from a policy lens to be able to move the needle there. Although I feel like a lot of it is just trying to like fill the gaps that all the other systems have left open. So with that, if you are okay, feel free to continue to put in comments, but I want to talk about this next one. I'm very interested in what we're calling social services programs, but don't always feel like they're benefiting people, depending. So we have the child support system, the child welfare system, the foster care system, and there may be others that should go under here. And I'm not sure where the justice system should fit, but maybe we retitle this and put that somewhere here too. But thinking about how student parent families fit, and especially where some of these systems require employment and discourage school explicitly. I have a friend who the judge ordered her to drop out of her master's program when she had like 1 semester left, which she managed to not do, but it was pretty disgusting. And so this is one where I think there might be personal experiences with you all are comfortable sharing, of course, whatever folks think about, but that really get complicated sometimes for student parents. Irma, this is a great question. I'm processing it.
So for this one, I feel like the child support system really affects fathers in school a lot, and even visitations really kind of intersect. I know that some of the dads that didn't live with their kids were living in on-campus housing, and they didn't have spaces to visit with their when they had visitations. So sometimes I'd have to like rent a hotel room to be able to have their child for an overnight, and some couldn't afford that. And then what I've seen, especially since I've been dispersing CARES Act funds, that there's a lot of dads that couldn't keep up with the child support during the pandemic, and it was really challenging. So they were seeking funds for child support to help out. That's just my personal experience from now.
The other thing that I think is really difficult for families with the childcare system is that if you receive, depending on which state, definitely if you receive TANF, but also in some states, even if you just receive Medicaid, the state will take your child support to reimburse themselves for the cost of your benefits. So, I've pointed this out that, if you have a 2-parent low-income family that's been, income benefits eligible, that, the state is paying the way for that. But if you have a single parent family that, had they still been a 2-parent family, would also be benefits eligible, they're still charging the non-custodial parent for the benefits, through the state. And so it creates a disincentive within families or within co-parenting relationships, that if you have 2 co-parents who, okay, well, we're both struggling financially and I have $100, I could either hand it to you and, you can use it to buy diapers and food for our kids right now and pay your rent, or I could pay the child support system, get credit, and you'll get $50, and it's the rule is 50 1/3. So it's, you get a third of whatever plus 50, whatever the income is for the month, plus $50. So I just lost, in the $100 example, because of that $50 pass through, I lost less. But had that been $1,000, like I would have just lost $400 on, that you could have handed me directly. And that creates, obviously when you don't pay your child support, there are all kinds of ramifications. So why is the state charging the child support system to reimburse themselves for families' benefits?
Yeah, and I think that actually varies by state what the pass-through is. But I'm gonna, oops, I was supposed to say 50. But it is kind of like nickel and diming folks at that point, where you're just, anyway. So that's a good point. The other thing that I just want to go back to Irma's question, which I think is a really good one, just a broader question about the rules that colleges do to perpetuate these kinds of barriers for students, or where they can be helpful, and especially in the workforce development space. I think that there's a lot of deference to the style and cultural way of thinking and speaking that employers have, and those employers may not be very progressive on this count. And so I think that there's a role for the college to be taking a stronger position as an advocate for their students and for who their students really are. And it varies a lot, I think, by the program and all this, but I just think it's a good, bigger question that I want to reflect on more probably after the session. So thank you for raising it. With that, I know we only have about 20 minutes left. And so I'm going to keep going forward and just mention the K-12 system, K-12 education, which play a really big role in student parent families, but maybe we can do this one kind of quickly. We've identified the following issues, and there's a lot of issues in this realm, but around education quality, school logistics, including the hours, location, and transportation, the school expectations of parent involvement, after school programs, free and reduced price meals, health and mental health services, and IEP and special needs policies. And we just have a few of these filled in for how student parents show up. But school expectations of parent involvement, where few schools recognize parents as learners, and teacher conferences and events can be hard to fit into people's schedules when you're your own student, also probably working and trying to meet your kids' school's expectations. And then also just around this IEP and special needs policies, that it takes a lot of time and energy to advocate for your kid, and that once again goes into that time deficit that student parents face all the time. So I think we'll go through this briefly because there could be a lot here, but if anyone has thoughts that you want to share about the K-12 system and how student parent families show up in that, you're welcome to share that thought. Maybe a moment in case people are typing, but I think I'm going to keep moving forward because this next one is one that I know we talk about a lot and could talk about for another hour, around childcare availability, affordability, and quality. And I know comments have already come up around this. So there's a lot of issues. The ones that we've identified and are open to others that we've missed are the CCDF subsidized childcare, Head Start and Early Head Start, state and local pre-K and 3K. So I guess that's where the preschool fits in, that question that came up earlier, but we may want to make it more explicit. College and university childcare, such as funded by C Campus, as well as childcare that's self-funded or funded through other means, and then childcare quality issues. And with this, we can see that just some early thoughts on where student parents show up is that CCDF, most states do allow post-secondary education, but it may be hard to find a convenient participating provider. We've heard a lot of folks who can only find providers that are half day or that are really far away, or it just, in certain markets, it's especially difficult. Head Start, Early Head Start, there's some coaching support to help parents meet their goals, but the hours of Head Start may not align with student parent needs. Within the C Campus, of course, this is explicitly to support student parents, but the funding, though it has been expanded, is still pretty low relative to other things. And then the college university childcare, it may be for student parents, but it's also college for college staff and faculty. It may have really long wait lists and may not be affordable. So those were some of the issues that we'd initially identified and are open to. I'm sure there'll be other comments and thoughts on this. Childcare deserts, it's a big issue. So we'll put that in there, that's right. There were some other comments earlier about CCDF and challenges you all have had. If you want to re-raise those, or if we can always go back later and fill it in. Well, what has been your experience as student parents? Go ahead.
Is it possible to add a heading, like childcare on demand or a backup care heading? I think that's been kind of our biggest thing, especially during the pandemic, is, you know, our school closed down because one child, you know, had a fever or this or that, and so suddenly, like, you're kind of thrown back into, like, well, how do I figure this out while I'm still doing school and things like that. And just resistance, you know, like C Campus can't fund anything that's not educational or something. So, like, you know, basically finding like sitter care or some sort of like situation is very challenging.
Well, during the pandemic, especially, a lot of the drop-in childcare centers can't, the colleges that are fortunate enough to have drop-in childcare centers can't do a drop-in right now. And, have to have the kids more scheduled in order to prevent the entire program from being closed down.
We're in the process of applying for C Campus right now for the first time. We're Bowling Green State University, and we've been preparing for this for a year and building a program, and really just confirmed, I guess, yesterday with the grant specialist for C Campus that childcare program we do not have on campus care. So our plan was to contract with community centers in existence already, concentrated where our 0 EFC student parents are. Those centers, in order to receive the C Campus funds, must be nationally accredited. There are 0 nationally accredited childcare centers in our 4-county area. So this seems to be perpetuating that inequity of, these are smaller scale centers that can't afford and don't have the personnel to be able to do this accreditation. And with our state creating its own accreditation system that is tied to the publicly funded childcare, there's no incentive for these care centers and these care programs to go for that national accreditation.
Who is that, like NAEYC, or I'm just, from a policy perspective, I'm just trying to clarify who is
Yeah.
that?
Yes, NAEYC, there's a list of, for our state, Ohio, there are 7 that are acceptable for our state, and NAEYC is one of them. COA is another one, but yes, all of those.
University of Michigan subsidizes childcare, but for student parents, but it has to be at an accredited, a licensed childcare facility. And I understand from the student parents, the licensed facilities are so much more expensive than the other ones that even with the subsidy, they can't afford it. And there isn't any subsidization of in-home care by friends or relatives who are foregoing income producing opportunities at the same time.
Something that I love about I've been working with several colleges and universities in Oregon that have student fee funded childcare subsidy programs. And they do, some of them are able to cover family provider care. So if you have a family member who's taking care of your kid and would like to pay them, you can, using that childcare subsidy program. However, other programs, because of liability issues, have to use licensed providers. And if your grandpa is not a licensed provider, well, then you have to go through that process with the state, which creates an extra tedious barrier to getting that support.
Other thoughts about childcare? So this is a really important issue, and you are raising great points about it. I do think we're going to have to modify our headings a little bit here too, based on the comments we've had. So I appreciate that thought.
Another thing, I don't know, when we were talking about Head Start and early Head Start, I'm just wondering if anyone partners with Head Start programs or is familiar with those kinds of partnerships that are supporting student parents.
Where in all this, though, things like openness of colleges to bringing children to class, or things like whether a library has a place where a student and their child can be, which won't bother everybody else and they can study. These policies aren't exactly any of the things that have been talked about, but they affect the life of student parents a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm actually,
Go ahead, Teresa, I'm sorry.
so I think that probably fits in the college access and success policies, but I think they're really important ones that you raised. So I just sent to Julia a note that, so she can note that down for that part, which we're not going to get into today, because we could have spent the whole time just talking about that and we wanted to get into some of these other realms, but appreciate that comment because it's a big issue.
Well, and I just wanted to add that that's something, you know, that in other research projects that we're doing that we're starting to look at is not just in terms of what services or offices are available on campus that are supporting student parents, but also what are the institutionalized policies of the college? Do they have family study rooms? Do they have are you allowed to bring your child to class? Is there, some colleges actually have policies that completely restrict or disallow children from being on campus at all. And we're also looking at the way the colleges market and represent who their students are, and finding that a lot of them really, I found several schools that have given me a stronger message that this is a school for people with dogs than it is a school for people with kids. So, you know, I do think that that's in our, you know, something that we're looking at within this scope. But as Teresa said, it's just, there's a lot of sticky notes and a lot of areas of policy, which is part of the reason I think historically people have kind of looked at student parents on TANF or student parents receiving food stamps or SNAP, but haven't necessarily looked at the way that student parents intersect or experience all of these different systems and policies simultaneously and in intersecting ways.
So with that, since we just have a few minutes left, I'm going to skip the next one, which I'm sure, again, we could talk about forever. Tuition assistance and financial aid. It's a huge area. And I'll just note what we have here, and we're very open to comments after the fact. And send it. We actually have an email inbox set up so that if people have additional thoughts you want to share after the session, we're really would love to receive those. But just about Pell Grants, scholarships, FAFSA and expected family contribution, private loans, the cost of attendance and return on investment, and student loan cancellation forgiveness. That's some of the realms here. And this kind of brings us back to the big circle that we started with. And I think we've noted some refinements based on this really valuable conversation, and we really appreciate your input. So in the last few minutes, we just would love to kind of get your big reflections about what this raised for you, what else you would like to see us address, what resources we should look at, because as we noted, we're going to be using this to develop a framework about where student parent families interact with different systems level policies, practices, and systems, and then create a roadmap about where is the best opportunity to. I'm hearing somebody. And where you create a roadmap about where there are opportunities to do more for student parents and help support their pathway to degrees across these systems that they're navigating. So, thoughts and reflections on any of this? And while we talk about this, I'm going to put up the email so that you all can note it down, have time to write that down. What do you think about this project? What do you think about this discussion? Does it raise ideas? What are your reactions?
I appreciate your sharing the information. We know that our student parents navigate a lot of systems, but seeing it mapped out really helps underscore what they're going through. And when we think of the time poverty that they're already facing and these systems to navigate, you know, we've got to figure out better ways for them to move through this space, to move through to self-sufficiency.
think it's really useful to see these things all together, but I also would put in a plug for in university policies, explicitly looking at what are the policies about the campus environment? What are the policies or attitudes about faculty behavior? I know a lot of research has shown a major obstacle for student parents is faculty attitudes. And are there rules about this? Is there anything encouraging faculty flexibility? Is there anything a student can do if they have an emergency? They can go to someone more centrally rather than having to go to every single professor individually. And I think you should take those things into account.
Yeah, and I'm putting in the chat a link to an article, but if you don't have access to scholarly article kind of things through your college or university, I am happy to send me an email and I will send you a PDF of it. It's a little older now, but it talks about how student parents are navigating all of these different systems and how much work it takes to do all of that. And so that might be something that useful to people as they're thinking about this. And so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. And please email us if you have any other thoughts or ideas. As you can see on the slide, the email is just studentparentframework@urban.org. And that goes, any of those comments, Teresa and I will get those as part of this project, but our email addresses are also there if you have individual questions or comments or would just like to follow up. We're both very receptive and open to meeting with people on Zoom and chatting more about these issues. And just thank you everyone for coming today. And I am supposed to remind everyone that there is a 30-minute lunch break now, which is really weird to me because it's 8:15 in the morning, at least my time. But the keynote address begins at 11:45 Eastern time. And just enjoying being at this conference, at least virtually, with everyone. So thank you so much.
Thank you all so much.
Teresa, I was trying to figure out if there's a way to download the chat.
Yep, I've saved it.
Okay.
I'll save it. Yeah, I have a save chat option. I just saved it. So.
I was trying to find it.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Great job, everyone.